Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Dhaliwal. My name is Gurpreet Dhillon. I'm a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. I sit in the business school and I specialize in is a mixture of several fields, technology, business, economics, and I specialize in cybersecurity, information security. So that's my area. Education is my passion, and I have been involved with various foundations and many of them, and one of my affiliations is here. I'm an executive director of the Information Institute, which is a non-profit organization out of the US, where the only thing we do is we collect money and we sponsor students in underprivileged people who do not have access, very much kind of stuff that is being done here through Kalkita Trust. But we do it on a global scale as well. The topic of my discussion presentation today is Innovate or Obliterate, Reshaping Education in the New Millennium. There are several challenges as we have been listening to our eminent speakers today morning about the pessimism that exists in the world of future, the optimism. My colleague Van declared openly that he's an optimist. I'm probably more of a pessimist as far as the future is concerned. But in that pessimism is my optimism that perhaps there are things out there which we can capitalize upon for the betterment of our society as such. But I think something which is remarkable, and that's partly because of my education and training, is the impact that information and communication technologies have had in the world of education, the world of business. So for me, and I think that theme resonates with a lot of people on the panel earlier as well, that they were talking about learning by doing. So for me, I think it's very important to look at the world of business that exists beyond the confines of a university. How is that business getting shaped and reshaped because of all sorts of advances? And then how do we position ourselves in the educational world? May that be at a school level, high school level, may that be at a university level, graduate or postgraduate, whatever level it might be. We kind of find our spot. We kind of define ourselves relative to where the world of business is going. So, and I think that's the angle that I would like to adopt and offer my comments. And in doing so, there are three assertions that I like making. Right? The first one is, and I'm going to develop these as I go along. My first assertion is that the current move towards what we call a service economy has its roots in the advances in information and communication technologies, which themselves have kind of created a borderless world. Honestly speaking, the first thing that we did yesterday when we came here was to figure out a way to connect to the internet. And doing so kind of connected me back to Virginia, to the stuff that was going on in my life, the stuff that I was doing with my work, and so on and so forth. It is indeed a borderless world, and to some extent this has been possible because of these wonderful advances that we have. There are negatives of all these advances, but there are so many positives. So that's an assertion I make, that and because of all this, we have created a borderless world of sorts. The second assertion I make is that the emergent structure of the organization, so to speak, that is evolving, is what I like calling an infonet organization. It's not the traditional corporation that we all aspire to work for. It's an infonet organization. At some point in time, when school kids graduate, when they move into college and the university, they do aspire to work for a corporation or a state or whatnot it might be. So what is that corporation going to look like? What is it that we are training our kids to be working in? So I call that the infonet organization. The third assertion I make is, it's a bit radical, and that's the combination of information and communication technologies, the borderless world, the infonet organization. All this is in many ways facilitating the corporate dominance, which is relying more on regional cooperation than national affiliations. Already there is evidence in the world where there are a lot of things happening at a regional level rather than having an allegiance to a given nation state, so to speak. And we can talk about that as we go along. And how do we train ourselves in that kind of environment, and what are we aspiring for? So, developing on my first assertion, which is a move towards a service economy, and what it has done for us in terms of the borderless world, it is interesting to see several things, and a lot of figures and facts that I'm presenting are from the Western world. They're from North America, from Western Europe. What we have observed in the world is that there's been a decreased profitability of large corporations. May it be the General Electrics of the world, the Shells, the British Petroleums, whatever it might be. We have certainly seen that the average net after-tax profit of North American non-financial corporations has declined from over 10% in 1965 to something minuscule today. So clearly there is decreased profitability for whatever reasons there might be, and we can think about them and debate about them and consider them. Also, what we see is there are fewer jobs today. The population is increasing, but there are fewer jobs. People attribute it to a range of things, right? If you look at the statistics, America's largest 500 industrial companies failed to add American jobs over the past 2 decades. The civilian labor workforce has always been around at a 5-time percentage point low. It's ridiculous if you think about it. We are educating our people, they don't have jobs. What do? Right? Increased divergence between executives and workers. We have seen this. In the 1960s, if you picked up the salary of any CEO in America, there was typically a 40% difference between the people at the shop floor level and the CEO. So essentially, the CEO was earning 40 times more than a workforce person at the lower level. Today, that difference has gone upwards of 70 times. So the CEO is perhaps earning 70 times more than what a worker is doing. What does this mean? What implication does that have? Which clearly is this huge divide that we are talking about between the rich and the poor. Right? And that certainly is going to have implications on the society as such in which we live, the kind of things that we do. All those things they're all interrelated in a sense. And how do we train our work? So how do we educate them in this complex domain that we are in? And obviously because of this increased divergence, there's an increased inequality among people. So the question that arises is, what's the big deal about it? Why bother? So what? Right? I personally am very passionate about it, and I think it is indeed a big deal. This is something that we should be concerned about as a society, as people who are contributing to the education world. The manifestations of these changes seem to have some kind of same kind of a root cause. The global societies that we are creating and the divide that we are building into the society between the have and have-nots is absolutely increasing. It is now a reality to move money, factories, technologies, equipments effortlessly across borders. There is no national loyalty to this. If Nissan wants to put up a plant in Paisley, Scotland, overnight, if they have labor problems, they move that plant and they can move it to south of France. If Tatas were not given the right kind of a deal in West Bengal, they move the plant to Gujarat, and so on and so forth. There are endless number of examples where it is very easy to move plant, equipment, and money across the borders. Where is that loyalty to a given society, to a given environment? The challenge that we face in the US, and I think every other nation, is to increase the potential value of what the citizens can add to the global economy. And this is by enhancing their skills and capacities and by improving their means of linking those skills and capacities to the world market. Right? I think that is the key, at least for me. And I think it's institutions such as these which are contributing, which are making a really positive mark in that sense in reshaping the world as we move along. It's not the rote education. It's not how we teach. It is linking the skills at whatever level it might be, school to high school to graduate level, and how do we link them back to the society. I think that's the critical thing. And if someone has figured that out, I think they scored the points. So my second assertion that I would like to make is that the emergent organization forms of the future are not the traditional organizations that we know of. They are really infonet organizations. What do I mean by these infonet organizations? This diagram really helps, and this is an amalgamation of different concepts that I have begun to appreciate over the years of my work. You know, increasingly what we see is in the old environment, any corporation, any business you looked at typically had very strong internal coalitions. They were very strong internally bound. But they also had very weak external relationships. They really did not depend a lot on external parties for their trade, for whatever it might be. To today, where we have moved from a rather hierarchical kind of an organization to a very organismic kind of an organization, where you have weak internal relationships, very strong external relations. You're probably trading more with external parties than internal to the organizations. And this is happening in the education field as we go along. This is happening in a lot of businesses through all sorts of relationships that companies seem to have. Closer to home here in India, the Indian School of Business is a perfect case in point. You know, they source their faculty from all over the world. They come and spend 4 weeks and go away. How many people are internal to ISB? Very few, hardly any, right? So do you really need to have that kind of a manpower base to run a university? Probably not, right? And this has implications as to where your loyalties are as an institution. Things that we appreciate, the concepts that we appreciated 10, 15, 20 years ago have evolved. They have changed today. So the new web of an enterprise that we are witnessing is something very interesting. And I see, and my apologies for the red lines here, which you can't read very well or see them very well. I see the corporation of the future from today onwards like a web. At the center of the web is what I call a strategic broker. This is an individual sitting there in the middle who has these exceptional abilities to connect the dots and make things work. But then you have a bunch of these problem solvers, problem identifiers who are spread out in all sorts of places. And at the nexus of these things is the combination of these unique skills, and that's the web of the future. That is the organization of the future for me, right? And I'll develop this concept a little further as we go along. So the key characteristics of this new organization that I'm seeing or I'm thinking is going to be there in the future is speed and agility. They can move pretty quickly. Lower overheads. There's no need to have these huge 30-story buildings with plant and equipment when you need to be mobile. Ability to switch directions quickly. Ability to discover new linkages between the problem solvers wherever they may be. Doesn't really mean that they have to be physically located in a given place. How do you establish linkages with people all over the world? I think that's what's critical in this new enterprise of the future. And the skills they would need is marketing, information technology, information system skills, blessed with some kind of a strategic and financial acumen. And how do you combine them for your advantage? I think that's where the future is, in my mind. Few strategic brokers, problem identifiers, and solvers work for high-value enterprises. They're not working for the GEs of the world. They're not working for the big corporations in India. In a sense, they are sharing the profits and returns of whatever enterprise they are involved in. Now, as I'm saying all this, I would like you to reflect back and say, is my school training the students to face this world? Is my university training the students to face this world? Is my education institution geared up to address these challenges as we move forward? My final and the third assertion for today is that the combination of information and communication technologies and the borderless world have facilitated a kind of a corporate dominance which relies more on regional cooperation. I'm not going to talk about a couple of things, but I'm just going to, I'm not going to show the slides, but I'm just going to talk about that. I think what normally happens when these kind of things occur, where you have a big divide between people who have and have-nots, is essentially turbulence in the society, right? Increasingly, you will see, and we are already witnessing this in India today, because of these disparities, how are you going to live? Where are you going to live? The safety factor, the physical safety factor is a big problem in this country today. So you end up creating gated communities of sorts, right? You end up creating safe havens, safe environments for children, for people to flourish and do things, right? Cut it off with the rest of the world, right? Or rest of the country. What happens when you do that? When you do so, you're really creating a big underclass, right? And that underclass is ready to pounce onto you at any time, right? If they do not get what they really want. It is a socio-economic challenge to deal with as we go along. So coming back to the jobs and the kind of training that we are going to be involved in 1990s census of the US government, when you look at the job classifications that they created, and they said, these are the classifications and this is where we probably fit the population of US, they had these terms. You are either a managerial or a professional specialty, you are either a technical sales or administrative support, you are either a service occupation person, operator, fabricator, laborer, transportation, and material moving person. This classification absolutely made sense when we were operating an economy that was based on large volumes, high volumes. It makes sense to organize yourself in this. Today, as we move along, we are not a high volume economy. The world is not a high volume economy. They're evolving from what they were years ago. In 2010, the occupational list of the US is something like this. Rather than rethink as to what the occupations are of the population, they just expanded the old list, thinking that they had done a good job, but I don't think so. The 3 jobs of the future for me are as follows, and this classification has little bearing upon the competitive position of different corporations. For me, the 3 categories are, the first one is the routine production services, right? These are people who are going to be doing repetitive tasks performed by the old foot soldiers of the American capitalism in high volume enterprises. These might include your blue collar routine, supervisory jobs, many information processing jobs. India always becomes very happy every time around they get an outsourcing contract. Little do they realize that all India, all the Wipros and the Infosys of the world are getting are low-end information processing tasks, right? They are the routine production service providers for the large corporations. If that's where you want to be, that's fine, right? That's fine, but you need to know that this is where we are, right? Is this what we are trying to place our students in? Is this the environment that we want to target? The second category for me are the in-person services. These are simple, repetitive tasks done on a person-to-person basis, perhaps with some kind of a vocational training. And there's absolutely no doubt we need them. And here you have the waiters and the waitresses, nursing home aides, janitors, taxi drivers, secretaries, and the list goes on and on, right? But that is vocational stuff, right? The third category for me is what I call the symbolic analytic services. These are the jobs that include problem identifiers, problem solvers, and my strategic brokers. These are the people who make and do things. These are my research scientists. These are my design engineers. These are my software engineers, the civil engineers, my investment bankers, and I call a few creative accountants, because accountancy is a pretty mundane task anyway. So unless you're creative, you really can't do anything. And the lawyers and the attorneys. If you were to look at these jobs, these three categories, they will cover probably 3 out of 4 jobs in the whole of Western world. Others would include perhaps miners and farmers, which constitute about 5% of a European American workforce. So I think, to sum it up, I think these are the 3 categories we are looking at. Now, the question is, yes, here's another classification. What does it do for me? What does this do for me as an institution at a high school level, at a college level, at a university level? I think it's absolutely critical to figure out that if these are the 3 classifications that we are thinking of in terms of the future, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, where we want our students to be, we might start thinking in terms of how we are going to work with the curriculum, what kind of skill sets we want them to have, what category of people go into vocational training, what category of people go into symbolic analysts and the high-end jobs, the problem solvers and the problem brokers. It is important to think in terms of those for education institutions. So every time I go to an education institution and I have to say, I said, forget the curriculum that you are working on. Start with a clean slate. Look 15 years on or 20 years on and see where the world is going. Let's not address the problems for tomorrow. Let's address the problems for day after tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.